let's talk about controlling a conversation first, because controlling a conversation is very closely tied with asking effective questions or asking what you might call better questions. So controlling a conversation is first about understanding who's actually in control of a conversation. Most people think the person in control of a conversation is the person who talks the most. In reality, the person in control of a conversation is the person who asks the most questions. So in our interview together, Doug, who's in control of this conversation?
I am.
You are. That means that you can control what we talk about next. You can control how long the conversation lasts. You can control my energy level in this conversation because you control the questions. When you ask a question, you can decide whether that question takes us in a new direction, takes us deeper into the same direction, whether that question takes us in a direction where I am interested and excited, or whether it takes us into a direction where I'm less interested and maybe more mellow. So it's super important for anybody out there who wants to learn how to control a conversation. The secret sauce is talk less and ask more questions. Now, once you understand that the question is the magic sauce to controlling a conversation, then the next thing you have to understand is that there's two different types of questions. There's open questions or open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. Most people will make the mistake of asking close-ended questions because they're very focused on trying to reach a certain conclusion. So a closed-ended question is a question that can be answered with a simple yes, no response, right? If it can be answered with one word, then it's a closed-ended question, right? What's your favorite color? Green. Did you like that restaurant? Yes. What's your favorite ethnic food? Korean food. These are all closed-ended questions. There's no critical thinking that's required. There's no way of gaining information from your target. With an open-ended question, the whole objective is to gain more information than what you give. Because information is the true currency of any relationship. The more information you can collect about someone else, the more power you have in that relationship, the closer and the more perceived loyalty that person has to you, because they believe that they are giving you more information because you are someone that can be trusted with that information. So now instead of saying, what's your favorite ethnic food? You can say, what regions of the world create the food that you're most interested in? Oh, well, I really like food from India and from Asia. Oh, can you tell me more about why you like those foods? Right? So now we're asking questions that are not binary, questions that can't be answered in one word. And what that turns into is people talking about their travel. They're talking about their first date. They're talking about their palate. They're talking about, I like Indian food because it's something I can't cook at home because I'm not a very good cook. And unless it comes out of a box or a microwavable tray, I don't really make anything. This is all information that we start to gather from people because we're asking open-ended questions. So a real quick rule of thumb, if you're asking a question that is what or who or do, like do you know how or do you know when, if you're asking a question that starts with do, who, or what, you're asking a closed-ended question. If you're asking a how or why question, you're asking an open-ended question, right? How did you first learn about Chinese food versus do you like Chinese food, right? Binary versus open-ended. And it's going to turn into a much larger conversation where the other person talks more and you direct where you go next because of the next question that you ask. I'll take a break there because that's a lot of information, but essentially controlling a conversation is all about understanding the kinds of questions that you're going to ask and then asking the right type of effective question.
As a follow-up, when you're asking an open-ended question and somebody gives you their response, I guess this more so applies to personal relationships, but I'm sure professional too, but to avoid the other person feeling like they're being like grilled or interrogated or interviewed, is there a helpful way to validate what they're saying in a short but sweet way so that way that person isn't going on and on with, speaking about themselves, but they're also able to again, validate and then punt it back to the other person to follow up on what they were saying?
Yeah. And it's a great point, because what you never want to do when you control a conversation, you never want to make the other person feel like they are under control, because that's going to shape their response. If someone feels like they're in a conversation where they're being interrogated or they're being questioned or they're being directed, then that's going to make them take more defensive action and more defensive sense of responses. So, to your point, the way that you bury your intention or hide your intention to control a conversation is through a process that we call two questions and a validation, right? So, two questions and a response, basically. So, you ask a question, and then you ask a related follow up question. And then instead of asking a third question, you validate or confirm what the other person just said. So, as an example, if you're talking to somebody and you say, "Where did you first learn about painting?" And they say, "Oh, I first learned about painting when I was a child because my mom used to paint, on the front patio." "Oh, what did your mom paint on the front patio?" "Oh, my mom always painted the sunrise over the cornfields because she loved the view from the front patio." Well, this is a point now where you've asked two questions that are related to each other to try to direct a conversation. You don't want to ask a third question, because now if you ask a third question, you start highlighting to the person that you're prying into their private life. So instead, you want to validate and confirm what they say. So then you might validate that by saying, "My grandmother used to paint also, and she would love to paint beach scenes because the beach is someplace that made her happy. Period." No question, no statement, or no question, no follow up needed. All you're doing is validating the experience that the other person said. And you can validate them by saying the same thing, like agreeing with them, or you can validate them by telling them something totally opposite, right? "Wow, nobody in my family ever painted at all. It's always been something that I was interested in, but I never had a chance to learn." So now you're not agreeing with the person, you're just validating, you're confirming for them that you are listening to the words that they're saying. And then once you make your confirmation, oftentimes what will happen is that person will give you more information, right? And that person will say something like, to the extent of, "Yeah, my mom has always loved to paint. It's something that always helped her relax. And she had a very stressful life, raising 3 kids and being a nurse." And now, boom, you're primed for another question. Do you see that? So, two questions will always lead to more information. And if you do a statement of fact as a confirmation, 9 times out of 10, the person will respond with more information that leads to more questions. But they'll never feel like they're under control, and they'll never feel like they're being interrogated.
So fresh, son.